See, one of the ways they try to capture this is they try to say this is a commercial operation in a residential area. In fact, this is a residential district that is zoned to allow commercial agriculture. And so we can have a commercial pig farm, we can have a commercial goat farm, and so a commercial oyster farm is really much less intrusive. It has no smell, it has no noise, it really doesn't have anything to disturb the people around it, around the oyster farm, and if conducted properly. And it is a commercial oyster farm, like any farm is commercial. If you sell one tomato, your tomato farm is a commercial tomato farm. Well, we're zoned for commercial farming, and there's really no difference in commercial aquaculture than commercial agriculture that we're zoned for. The way they try to capture it is, oh, it's a residential zone, and Garrett wants to do a commercial operation in a residential zone. Right? And that's not really what we're trying to do. We're just wanting to do a farm, and we want to be left alone. It's very interesting here in York County. We have two oyster farmers that are both being attacked by the county, and one oyster farmer that's being supported by the county. There's a gentleman that is actually my closest neighbor that was against oyster farming and against aquaculture, and dedicated 2 to 3 years of his life to actually stopping oyster aquaculture in York County, and even stopping oyster aquaculture in Virginia. He actually started a campaign to help re-elect the current Board of Supervisor members. He was the largest contributor, set up a PAC, and became the largest contributor to 2 of their re-election campaigns. Unfortunately, they did get re-elected. After that, he was then appointed to the Planning Commission. So now this gentleman that was against oyster farming, was against oyster aquaculture, now has his own oyster farm, and you can see about 200 feet off of our property, you can see his oyster cages all around us, and the county has sanctioned that. He's on the Planning Commission now. So they've appointed him to the Planning Commission that helps to approve land use, or helps to make recommendations for land use. And now he has his own oyster farm, but the 2 other guys, myself and one other gentleman, our oyster farm, for some reason, because of zoning laws, are inappropriate for York County. There was a rumor when we were applying for the permits for our piers, and by the way, these are not commercial piers, these are residential piers, and were approved as residential piers. The Virginia Marine Resources Commission has sanctioned all residential piers to bring in fish, crabs, clams, shellfish. That happened many years ago. It had nothing to do with us. So residential piers are allowed to be used to harvest commercial seafood. You do not need to have your piers converted to a commercial pier to harvest seafood on your piers. We have never sought to have our piers changed to commercial use. We could apply for that in the future, but we've never had the need to do that. When we were applying for the second dock, we had one dock that we had by right. When we were applying for the second dock, my neighbor, the same neighbor that's on the Planning Commission, sued me, my family, and the state of Virginia, so that to prevent this dock that's 700 feet away from his property, and probably 800 feet away from his house, 600, 700, 800 feet away from his house. And so in my response to that lawsuit against us from the same neighbor that's now on the Planning Commission, we said that we had no intention of doing a commercial use on our property. And that was in a letter to neighbors. In that letter to neighbors, that was in response again to an accusation by an anonymous source, by an unnamed anonymous source to the county, that we were going to turn our docks into a marina and rent out boat slips. We've never considered that. We never have thought about that, and we don't plan on doing that. And that was what the response was about not doing a commercial operation on the docks. Every single complaint against us for 5.5 years has been a hypothetical complaint. We've never had a complaint that's been brought to my attention of anything we've ever done in 5.5 years of something we're doing that's creating a noise or a smell or any kind of a problem at all. Our biggest piece of equipment is a 7 horsepower power washer. Our lawnmower has a 15 horsepower motor. And so it's just crazy, the idea that it's going to create a problem in the neighborhood. I'm a realtor. I've been in the real estate business for 37 years. I know what affects property values and what doesn't. We're on an isolated point. We're in the northeastern point of all of York County. We have a body of water, a little cove separating us from our only adjacent neighbor. That only adjacent neighbor allegedly had somebody that was looking at his house, according to Don Wiggins, and this is an unnamed person that was looking at his house, that said that they didn't want to be near a commercial oyster operation. Well, my oyster operation is hundreds of feet, 400 feet probably away from their property. Any part of our operation is. At least 300 feet, even a dock that we use is at least 300 feet from their property line. That same neighbor that has his property for sale has a commercial marina next to his property where he conducts his oyster farm. So which oyster farm were they talking about? His that were adjacent to the land, 100 feet away? Or were they talking about ours that's much smaller than his, that's 300, 400, 500 feet away and across a body of water?